Ashe County Oral History Project, and an interview with Dr. Dean Jones, Sr., interviewer Clarice Weaver, June the 4th, 1981. Now, Dr. Jones, we were talking about, I think about some of the areas back in the country that were a little rough.
Anyway, I very often get calls back up there in that White Oak country, and Ben Miller was living there. He's one day knew I had to call up in there, and he knew there'd been a whole lot of fighting and shooting going on up in there. He says, "You're not going up in there without a gun, are you?" He kept a pistol all the time. He brought out a great big old pistol. He says, I don't want you going up in there without the pistol. I didn't want the thing, but he just insisted. He made me take it. I laid it in on the seat beside me. It's the only time I just carried that along for satisfying him. But of course they say now that you're better off without one, but I never did think of taking one. In fact, I never owned one myself. Except Dr. Lester Jones gave me one time, and I gave it away pretty soon.
Did he carry one all the time?
He had one up there in his office. I don't know if he carried it. I think he did carry one all the time. But
I never heard of a doctor, though, having to use one, did you?
no. But
Of course, that was before my time.
he insisted on giving it to me, and I tried to turn it down, but he was on the stage that he wasn't listening to reason. I don't know. You may know his history a little bit. He was a little bit given to getting under the influence, and he was pretty well under the influence, and he just wouldn't. He was waving that thing around, and I took it to get rid of it. It was a high-powered thing, an expensive gun. Anybody that liked guns would have been
Collector's item.
Yeah, but I didn't want it.
Well, these people that usually, get out on the weekends, I guess they just get to drinking too much. Like the man said, his best friend.
Yeah.
That was there. It wasn't that they were necessarily that mean, but a little drinking brought it on, didn't it?
Yeah.
It seems as though that I've heard that there was a lot of that going on back out in the mountains, well, all around. There's drinking, and that's the way they'd spend their weekends, frolicking and fighting and what have you. After we got our hospital here, now as you said, did we have a manager at the beginning, or were you the manager too?
I was the superintendent. They had what they called a business manager. Mr. Scott, Langdon Scott, was a business manager from the beginning, I believe. He was supposed to look after the business end, pay the bills, and look after the collections and one thing and another. Of course, he always wanted me to make all of the decisions, and he just done the more or less bookkeeping and the routine work mainly. And I believe I was just labeled a superintendent, and I was mostly responsible for all the decisions that were made for the first several years. And then after Mr. Scott quit, as for several months there, they didn't have an official business manager. Letty was working in the business office, and she took charge of it and was the acting business manager for several months. Like to work herself to death trying to keep up with the insurance.
Oh my, that must have been a job.
Till Mr. Kirkham came in and took it over, and of course he took on more responsibility than Mr. Scott had. He did take a whole lot of the management off of my shoulders, and I don't remember exactly what the terms were, but in general, I just looked after the medical care business, and he looked after the running of the thing otherwise. And for several years yet, I was listed as superintendent and him as the business manager, but then sometime they changed it over and he became administrator and I became a medical director, which is a different terminology, but duties just about
Basically the same.
the same. I mean, it just sort of evolved into where they didn't change, what the names changed. Just of what he was and what I was.
How many rooms did you was in the hospital?
The first hospital was officially 25 beds. That was the front part of this old hospital. That was the part the WPA built. And in the 50s, pretty soon after Mr. Carton came in, we had the first expansion and built this back wing, the brick part of it, and added a new operating room and a new kitchen and furnace room and a whole lot of new laboratory and a whole lot of other apartments downstairs. That was running up to 50 beds.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one down yonder is supposed to be officially 76 beds.
Let's see, when did this one phase out? What year was it?
71, I believe, when we went down yonder. I never swear by these dates.
No, well, that's all right. 'Cause
I think it was 71 that we moved down there, in the fall of 71, I think.
that was a big move, but it must have kept you running for a hospital with that many patients to keep up with all you were doing. It might have been easier on horseback.
Well, yeah, it kept me going, but I was lucky, I reckon in some ways. I never did recognize that I got tired. Well, you used to tell me that I should be tired, and she said, "You want to know if I'm not tired?" And I said, "No," and I wasn't. But of course, in more recent years, I know what it is to be tired. But back at that time, I didn't know what it was to be tired. And I was lucky in that way, I reckon. I just had enough energy and I just never did run out of energy. If there's any thing, if I had time to get out and go hunting or fishing, I never was too tired to do that.
What was now? What surgeries was considered that you? I mean, what were the major surgeries that you had to send them on to Winston? You could always. I mean, with gallbladder.
No,
and that
we did gallbladders. Of course, usually we didn't do any urology other than just some minor emergency procedure. We'd send all the urology off, and of course any chest surgery other than just an emergency treatment of some chest injury or something, we wouldn't do any. Wouldn't open up a chest to go and do any chest surgery or any brain surgery. Of course, we did treat a few fractured skulls, and I took a knife blade out of a fellow's brain one time. It got stabbed in there and got a knife blade broke off in his brain, and it stayed in there for a few days before it was recognized that the blade was broke off in there, and he got meningitis. I took that blade out, but wouldn't have done that, but it's one of those times that the roads are so icy they couldn't have got down the mountains if they tried to. They'd have gone off the road. It's just the ice everywhere. It's just a great ice. There's no traveling anywhere. So I took that out. But I mean, ordinarily any brain surgery or chest surgery or kidney or bladder surgery I sent off. Most abdominal surgery I do. Of course, I didn't do vascular surgery, any aneurysms or anything like that.
This hospital has certainly mean a lot to Ashe County and to its people, and I know as a physician it must have had a double meaning for you as a physician as well as for knowing how much it would help the people in the community.
Yeah, it give you some place to work where you thought you could do something.
You felt needed, didn't you?
Yeah.
I was wondering if you recall what is the longest amount of time that you were in surgery doing an operation. I know sometimes when I've heard some of the nurses would say, well, he's still in surgery, and then one would say, I just don't see how he can be in surgery, and it must be awful trying to have to concentrate and work that long at one period at a time.
I think maybe we have been as long as 7 hours on one case, perhaps. I believe it's about as long as I remember any.
Mm.
Not many of them that long. Of course, they do now. Some of these graft operations they do now, some of them go 10 and 12 hours, but we don't get into any of that so far.
Sure, that's a long time. But let me just mention, too, I know there's been several honors bestowed on you. If I'm not mistaken, over at Emory and Henry, when I was over there the other day, not the other day, but my daughter goes to school over there. What was that? Did I see your photograph? A painting of you over there at Emory, or wasn't you? You were honored over there at Emory and Henry, weren't you?
Yeah, I had this. Alumnus of the year, I reckon it was the year before last, I believe.
I believe, too, you've been very, very active in the Rotary Club and have had some honors there as a Rotarian.
Yeah, most all of the Rotarians have been there long, have been the president of the Rotary Club. That is one that...
Paul Harris Fellowship,
Yeah.
Jefferson Rotary Club, 1979.
In fact, I don't know enough about that to tell you what it is.
Well, it's a nice plaque, anyhow. It's beautiful. Very nice. And, of course, the hospital, our new hospital, I believe, has your portrait.
Yes, of course it was put down in this hospital, and then they moved it down with the new hospital, and they moved that. I don't remember how many years ago they did have that painted. That must have been 20 years ago or longer. But that portrait was painted.
Well, and of course I know one of your hobbies is fishing, because I've heard that you're quite a fisherman. Is that a good way to unwind?
Yeah, Some fellow says you can't fish and worry at the same time. I think it's, if a person that likes fishing, I think it's the most relaxing thing that you can get into, perhaps. It's not a person that likes it, it's not a strain on them. Of course, I guess somebody's just doing it because they thought they had to. I guess it'd be a strain on them,
Be a chore, wouldn't
but yeah.
You've seen an awful lot of changes in well, the lifestyles of our people, as well as in the medical profession here. Having spent your boyhood days in the county too, you've really seen some changes in Ashe County, haven't you?
Yeah.
What? I know that a lot of the housewives, when I talk about change, they invariably say, well, electricity has brought about some of the biggest changes for them. In the medical world, was the hospital one of the greatest changes for our...
Well, for our county, I guess it was. And of course, the antibiotics made a big change. And all kinds of technical improvements for diagnosis and for treatment, and there's some of them that they're so new that some of us don't even know enough about them to name them or to exactly know how they apply.
You've been kind of cautious of well, I don't know if cautious is a good word or not.
Well, I don't like to take on something just because it's new and because it's got a lot of hullabaloo raised about it. I want to see what it's going to do before and if I know something has been successful, I don't want to turn it loose till I see something that's really better.
You were on, when you first began practicing, and I guess still today there's some use, but a lot of herb medicines were used in your early days. Wonder how those home remedies stack up in your mind. Was some of them pretty effective?
Well, some of them, of course, I think one thing that that I guess when I first came along, one thing that probably was used, one general thing was people was given purges and calomel and strong purges very often, which is rarely ever given today. In fact, I don't think the average doctor now knows what a calomel is. And back when I was in school, most everything that you didn't have a specific for, or wasn't surgical or something, started off treating with a dose of calomel and followed by some other kind of laxative. In other words, that was a favorite remedy for most everything. I don't know whether you was raised on that or not.
No, but I've heard them talk about it.
And they tell me that Dr. Lester Jones made his family take calomel and a strong laxative every weekend and all their lives. They raised them up on that.
Is that right?
Just as a routine practice. I don't know whether that was true or not, but that's what I've been told.
Well, I know, when I was growing up, cod liver oil was given the worst tasting for a vitamin, I guess. Worst liquid, I guess it was. It was terrible tasting. And then they finally graduated to the tablets.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, that's about the extent of vitamin usage in those days was something like that, wasn't it? I mean, they didn't have these one a day. And
no, I don't think so.
How about the superstitions at that time? Did you run into much superstitions? I know Sister Sophie told me that, which she said she let them do it because it didn't bother her, but I believe she won a few of her patients, very few, but they did ask for a knife to be put under the bed to help cut the pain during the delivery. Did you run into any of these mountain superstitions?
Well, I've heard of that. I don't know that I've run into anybody that actually wanted to do that, but I mean, that's an old saying I've heard of. I don't remember any instance where somebody really advocated it seriously.
I think she said it could do no harm to the patient, and if it settled them down, she let them put the knife under the bed.
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't do any harm. Well, we have a new hospital out here, and it's a beautiful hospital. You certainly have make this county the facilities we have here today. You've certainly been instrumental in bringing about. It must be kind of rewarding to you to sit back and think, well, you had a part in something that nice or something that beneficial for the community.
It's been sort of a satisfaction.
When did you retire? Or did you just get retreaded? Are you still working at all?
No, I retired about 3 years ago. Quite as physically able to do some of the surgery as I had been, and I just felt like that was the center of my work, and I didn't feel like I wanted to keep up the other part of it unless I could do that. So I felt like it just...
Well, of course, since your retirement, you've been active in many things here. And looking back, you feel, I guess we've come a long ways from the time you first started, haven't we?
Yeah.
A long ways. Now your son, I don't believe I mentioned that, of course, I know, but there might be someone who don't know that your son is a surgeon also,
Yeah.
Asheville Hospital.
Yeah, of course, he's limited himself to surgery, of course. Not as strict as some people do. He will, in some cases, do a little treatment, but ordinarily he don't take on a patient for medical care, unless it's got some basis on surgery. Of course, sometimes he starts off with a surgical case, and then they develop some medical condition afterwards. He may look after him for a while, but he don't take a thing on just for prolonged medical treatment.
Your father's father wasn't a medicine.
No, he was a farmer from over in Silas Creek.
So your son and yourself and your 3 generations of physicians there. 3 generations of doctoring takes it pretty back through the county, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sure does. Well, is there anything that I left out, Dr. Jones, that...
I don't know.
I know you've been a very active member in the Methodist Church out here, too, haven't you?
Well, I've been pretty regular.
A lay speaker, too, I guess.
I did for a while. I hadn't done that for the past few years. I always rather hesitant to talk. I never got so it was easy for me to get up and talk.
Well, I do know this, you done very well. I remember very well your visit in our church, and I thoroughly enjoyed and remember some of the things you said. It's very good. Let's see, did I cover all the epidemics? Were there any other epidemics other than typhoid and diphtheria that we've had?
I don't...
Or the flu, I meant typhoid and the flu. Did diphtheria ever get to be an epidemic stage?
I don't remember any epidemic of it. Of course, we've had a few cases back over the years, but I never remembered any epidemic of it.
When did we get to doing them so routinely here in the county? I know when I was a little girl, we'd line up and have our typhoid shots before school started and a few things like that, but
I don't know just when it became routine for the health department to give those vaccines, but I guess they've been doing it back since probably since the late 30s or 40s, I guess. Of course, they've changed some, maybe added some to them recently, but I think they did give some vaccinations back when we first opened the hospital. I used to send all of my patients to the health department for vaccinations. I had more than I could do otherwise. A lot of the doctors do their own vaccination. I never did much of that.
did you have to take, or did you take
They used people bring some produce in, I think, on the hospital bills, and I have occasionally back in my practice out before we come to the hospital that take something like that for pay. Common as
had to more, your father probably had to do that more so, or that was probably.
I suppose so.
Well, I certainly thank you. Have we backed anything out that you can think
I
of?
don't know of anything. Of course, I said one thing in there probably out to get them printed. I did mention Dr. Lester Jones giving all his family this likes to go every weekend. Maybe that shouldn't come out.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. Well, I'll get it typed up and I'll let you cross out anything you don't want. How's that?
I guess it might be that might be a rumor. It might not be true, and some of the family might not.
Like it?
might
Well,
not like it.
when we get this typed up, I'll send it over and let you read it. And then what you want taken out, or if you want to add some more to it for anything, why, you can do that too. How would that be?
Could be
Well, I certainly thank you, Dr. Jones. Appreciate this.
sometimes I get talking and ramble on and say things that I never think about what they sound like to somebody else. Maybe some things I say wouldn't, not meaning it for any harm, but wouldn't appeal to the people involved.
Well,
I think all of talking about Dr. Lester being under the influence, I guess they all know that and it's been recognized. I guess
yes, I'm sure.
I don't reckon there's
Well, before I forget it, what were some of the other doctors around here at the time you first started? I know your dad,
Well,
and there's Dr. Lester, and
his daddy was still practicing when I first started.
Was that
Dr. Thomas
Dr.
Turner,
Tom.
and Dr. B.C. Waddell at Castle Creek, and Dr. Reeves over at West Jefferson, B.E. Reeves, and Dr. Long, and Dr. Tedman. You knew of
I've heard Dr.
and
Tedman.
C.R. Eller. And
Now, was Dr. Tucker, Joe Tucker, was
Joe
he?
Tucker, he never was licensed. He was an unlicensed practitioner. He had been in the Army and been in the medical corps, I think, in the Army, and had a little practical experience in the medical corps. And when he got out, I believe he did go over, maybe in stayed in Dr. Pennington's office a little while. Well, Dr. Pennington's another one. He was still practicing somewhere when I started. And I think Joe Tucker stayed in his office for a while, but he never had any official medical practice.
Mm-hmm. Well, then there's how about a Dr. Wilcox?